Kyle, welcome to the podcast, man. Happy to have you here.
It's great to be a part of it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. So I would love it if we could kick this off. If you could give the audience kind of an inside look on your life as far as what did life look like for you growing up? Like, what was life like for little Kyle as you grew up?
Little Kyle. I haven't thought about that in a while now. I grew up in a really small town, actually, called Marshfield, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to give you an idea of how small this town was, it's home of two things: the world's largest round barn and the world's largest urinal. And so we really had some humble beginnings. Like I went to high school in just a very small town in central Wisconsin. You know, the biggest cities were Minneapolis, but that's 4 hours away, or Milwaukee, which is 3.5. And, you know, kind of just that little middle of nowhere place. But yeah, I grew up with three older siblings. They always pushed me pretty hard, whether it was in sports or academics or whatever it was. But just kind of grew up in that small town feel where it just kind of was humble beginnings from the very start.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, as you started to grow up, you know, someone and I were talking about this, and it's been an interesting thing I've thought about lately. Is it's almost like a superpower for some people that grow up and they go, this is what I want to do with my life, and they end up doing that. And it's like, if that's you, you are one of few. And so I'm curious for you, obviously you've done a lot of different things in your life. Did you have an idea of what you wanted to be when you grew up? Was it anything like what you're doing now, or, you know, kind of what was your thought as you were growing up for what you would do one day?
No, I was fully convinced I was going to be in the NBA, and I was just
Let's go.
you know, an all-star, and everybody was going to be getting my autograph. And little did I know that I'd be signing autographs in a different capacity, which is in my books. That was not on the radar at all. But I think that's kind of the fun part. Is I think growing up, one of my best friends, he always says, like, you were kind of always a jack of all trades, where you were good at a lot of stuff. And he said, I don't mean this as an insult, but I don't know if you were great at anything, like, in particular. And it was kind of funny. Like, it's very true. Like, I played guitar and was constantly starting little, like, comedic musical groups or things like that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I was in my third grade classroom, the little entrepreneur. I was charging people to do math problems and was paying off winners as like a 50-50 raffle. Like, I'll keep half, you keep half kind of thing. Got in a lot of trouble for that in elementary school. But yeah, it was definitely just like a process of trying a lot of things, like through the course of my collegiate career, through the course of my early professional career. Little Kyle never thought that I was going to be an author or a speaker or an entrepreneur. I kind of just was trying everything and having fun along the way.
Yeah. So what was the process for you then? So you're growing up, you're going to the NBA. This is the vision, the dream. Obviously, one day the dream changes, right? You realize, you know, NBA may not be it. I'm curious for you, kind of walk us through, you know, what that moment looked like. If you grew up, this was your dream all the time you're growing up, and all of a sudden, you know, it's not an easy phase of life, I would assume, to go, this isn't actually going to happen. So how did you kind of get through that to the next phase?
Yeah, I feel like I grew up as kind of a hard nose. I'm going to tackle anything. Adversity isn't going to stand in my way. Like, I'm going to push through. And I think a big thing why that was the case is when I was 10 years old, I tore my ACL. Not a thing that most 10-year-olds do.
Yeah.
You know, usually that's a grown-up.
What were you doing?
I was on a trampoline. Yeah, no. I was on a trampoline in my neighbor's backyard and got launched a little too high. Came down wrong, you know. But the crazy thing about that, and I didn't know this obviously at the time, but when I find out I have a torn ACL, they say, Kyle, to do surgery on this, we actually have to go through your growth plates, but you're 10 years old, like, you have a lot of growing left to do.
Yeah.
And so you either can have the surgery now and just have one leg that's shorter than the other for the rest of your life, or you can wait until your growth plates come together and we'll do the surgery then. And so from the age of 10 to 16, I did not have an ACL. And I felt like Forrest Gump. I was wearing this huge brace on my leg at all times and just like trying to play sports with people, and my knee would give out here and there. I'd have to tough it out, and people at the YMCA would be like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Let's go again. Let's go again." You know? And so I was that little kid who just very early on was like, man, like this is what pain feels like. This is how adversity strikes, and how do we kind of overcome that? And as my sophomore year of high school rolled around, I had made varsity soccer and varsity basketball at a Division I high school without an ACL. So I thought that was a good accomplishment. And kind of to spiral off of that, I just kind of was like, well, now I'm this hard-nosed kid. Like I want to do whatever it is to be successful, and ended up becoming a basketball walk-on at Marquette University. So I got to play with these guys who were going to go to the NBA, you know, never got a minute in any game, but actually saw what it took to see guys like Jimmy Butler on the basketball court, and Lazar Hayward and Wes Matthews, and say, okay, these guys are at another level. It takes a little more than just some grit to get to that level.
Yeah. And an ACL.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I tore my ACL not when I was 10. I think I was 16 when I tore my ACL. And it's to think that you could go through that for 6 years with no ACL is ridiculous, because I think I waited 8 months to have surgery. And you know, you like, especially you're young, you're like, oh, I'm going to keep doing activities. And I didn't have a brace, but it was like, then I tore my ACL more, then it tore my meniscus. And it was like, in a matter of 8 months, my knee was totally jacked. So for 6 years to play on that is savage. That's ridiculous. Yeah,
it was rough, and it was something else. But again, I think sometimes being naive can be a really positive quality. And it's not just a quality for kids either. So anyone listening to this podcast, you know, sometimes going into something not fully knowing exactly what you're getting into can be the best asset for you in the long run. And so for me being 10, like my parents are like, put your brace on. I'm like, no, you know, I'm playing baseball, you know, and like, get your brace on. Like, no, I'm a kid. I'm just going to do it. And I think my body kind of just adjusted, because I just kind of felt this, I'm going to do this because I'm a kid. I don't know what could go wrong. Sometimes in life or in entrepreneurship or wherever, like that's what we have to do. We have to be a little naive and just kind of jump before we know how deep the water is.
For real. So if we continue down this path, then I'm curious, when do you go from NBA player as the vision to author? Like how does that process come where you go, I'm going to start writing, you know, from being an athlete, someone that, you know, I think traditionally as you think an athlete, definitely not as someone who's a writer. So how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I think I was doing a lot of reading. And honestly, in high school, I was always like reading. Like my friend Brianna is a reader. She's the nerdy library girl, you know. Hey, Brianna, you're great. I love you. But that was always the thing in high school. And then one of my basketball coaches in high school said, well, I majored in English in college and I love to read. This is this 6'8" monster of a guy, the manliest guy I know. I'm like, what the hell? Like, you like to read, you know, what's this all about? I should probably pick something up. And he started suggesting books that maybe I would like, or things that actually like would spark my interests. And so I started reading a lot, and I started loving it. And I felt like that just became like a part of my personality a bit, is like, I don't just have to be an athlete. Like I can be bright. I can be, you know, somebody who enjoys sitting down by myself and being an introvert. I can read these pages, be taken to dream worlds of magic. Yeah. Like who knows where I'm going to go if I pick up a book, you know?
I love that.
And it led more and more to self-help books and leadership books and lots of just different genres that I just loved. And by my senior year of college, this is skipping around a little bit. I've had lots of different experiences, but I had been training for a year in the Army. So I learned a lot from strong military leaders. I was a walk-on for a Division I basketball team. So I learned from strong coaches and things like that. And I had this crazy experience. And it starts with an airplane, as some crazy experiences do. I just was late for a flight, and I was getting on, and I jump on the airplane. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm so late. I'm so sorry. And the stewardess, the flight attendant, was just like, hey, you're actually in luck. You're the last person to board, and we have one last seat in first class. I'm like, kind of nice, you know? And so they leave me first time in first class. Like, I'm a senior in college. I've never flown this way before. And I sit next to this guy who just sparks up this conversation. And he turns out to be this really wealthy man. He's really interested in leadership and positive development and things like that. And he asked me who my favorite author is. And I tell him, and he said, hey, I have a proposition for you. If you read 2 books by my favorite author, and they're not more impactful to your life than the 2 books from your favorite author that you love, I will fly you anywhere in the world you want to go and back for free, no cost to you. But you got to read these books. And so I'm like,
Jeez.
Deal. Like, there's no downside.
Yeah,
right?
Easy.
And so I'm like, of course. So I go home, I read these 2 books.
What were the 2 books?
They were books by Andy Andrews. I think they were I can't even remember at this point. The Servant or the Servant's Gift or something like that.
Okay.
Andy Andrews. I'll have to look him up and get back to you. But I read these books, and then just in the back of my mind, I just keep thinking like, man, I wish I would have known some of this when I was younger. And I start doing more and more research on this, and it's like, man, they really aren't writing these books for high school students. I find out more and more it's because high school students don't have deep pockets. They're not buying 50 copies of these books. They're not making anybody a New York Times bestseller. And I'm like, I'm a senior in college. I have nothing left to lose. Like, I've learned some great things from strong military leaders and basketball coaches and all these people. I'm going to do it. And so I think I just saw the need in that moment and had to get back to this guy after my book got published and say, hey, your book's actually made a huge impact on my life. So.
Whoa. So those books were kind of the inspiration to write your books.
Yeah. So they were kind of the conduit of how do you tell a story in a really cool, interesting, different way, but that leads people to lessons that are hopefully memorable for years to come.
Yeah. And kudos to you for taking action on that. You know, I think so many people, you know, something like that happens. They go, I got this spark, this thing I think I should do, but you actually took the action. I'm curious, if we look a little deeper into that, what made you be someone that wasn't like, oh, a book and kids need this, and versus like, I'm going to actually do this? Because it takes time, effort, energy, money, all those things to go through that process. So what made you be an action taker rather than just, you know, sitting on the bench?
Yeah, that's funny, because I think this conversation even can come full circle in that question of
for sure.
How naive to think that as a senior in college I could write a book that people would actually read, right? But it's not. And I think that's the fun part, is sometimes you have to jump before you truly know exactly where the ground is and see if you can fly, you know? And honestly, that's funny too, because my latest book is called Action Packed Leadership. You know, it's all about taking action and going for it. And so I do think like it's been ingrained in me for a long time, and I don't know exactly why, but that we do get one life to live. It's super important that we do what we can to find purpose, to find value, to feel energy and enthusiasm in that life that we're living. And I think my senior year of college was that time where I was like, all right, like, let's go for this. You know, if I'm going to write a book, I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. and go to coffee shops before my classes, and I'm going to do it, you know, like there's no in between. Right. And so I think it just was kind of like a leap, like an action that I felt like I needed to take in that moment.
Yeah. It's so interesting for anybody listening to this, it's like, what if you just lived your life? I don't know if naivety is a word, but like, what if you lived your life taking action, being naive? Like, it's so, you know, so many times we get caught up in our head of, you know, even trying to figure out your life. Do I like this thing? Do I not? You know, all those, should I do this thing? It's like, if you were just naive about it and said, let me just do it and just see where it goes, it's like you are going to have so many lessons, learnings, things that you get throughout that process just because you thought it was possible, that you thought you could do something. But so many times people, I feel like, do sit on that sideline and they go, what if, and you wake up one day and nothing really happened in your life because you never took any action. So
Totally. And honestly, it's something I have to remind myself of quite a bit because I am someone who likes to be certain. I think a lot of
yeah,
people, they want,
totally.
and I think, who was it? I think Jim Carrey, of all people, the funny guy,
Yeah.
is somebody who had said at one point, you need to allow yourself to ask the universe for things that you want, move towards them, and not worry about how they come to you. Because sometimes you're going to move towards things. Maybe you're going to move towards it and it's going to open a door that you didn't think existed. You're going to laterally move and be in a situation that you never even foresaw.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the fun part about it. And so I'm constantly trying to remind myself of that, of like, you don't need to be certain. You don't know how, you need to know how it's all going to come together or happen, but you need to start. And by starting, you're going to see a lot of things that are going to be new to you, whether you fail, succeed, or anywhere in between.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like just by taking that action, another door, it's almost like there's like levels to it. Like if you never took one action, you're never going to see the door that's behind that next door because you never went through that door. And it's like, it's probably a door that you didn't think you were supposed to go into. But if you never go into that first level, you'll never get the second and the third and the fourth. It's like life does have this beautiful way of zigzagging you through life in the most perfect, beautiful way. But if you never take that first step,
Totally.
again, nothing happens. So,
and it's why I love, podcasts. I love motivational videos. I love stuff like that. But I think sometimes what's lost is that the idea is that these are to help you move.
Yeah.
They're not just to listen to and absorb and take in. Like it's great to be a sponge, but every now and again, you got to squeeze that sponge and find out really what's going to get you going,
For real.
What's going to get you to start your own podcast, and so I think that, it's just interesting that sometimes we absorb so much. We become so knowledgeable. We know things about everything. Social media has helped us with that. But we never dip our toes in the water. And then somebody's like, well, is the water warm? I don't actually know. I haven't been in it. I didn't go swimming. So I think that, our actions matter. And sometimes people think that it's just like, well, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I'm not the strongest. I'm not always motivated. And I think that's such a myth that you have to be motivated to take action. Like the people who are successful most often are the people who take action even when they're not motivated. And I just think that at the end of the day, you need to find what is worth it to you to take action on, and then take even just the smallest of steps towards it. Because once you start, those bigger actions are the big, like, okay, how do you get smart enough? How do you get strong enough? How do you get motivated enough? You're not just going to get it overnight. You're going to take little actions along the way that lead you to this person that you never knew you could become. Yeah.
So true. It's funny you say that. I was at this conference just a few days ago, and there's this guy, Trent Sheldon. You're probably familiar with. He's a speaker and he speaks all over the world. And one of the things he was saying that was so interesting is, we look at how much consistency plays a role in your life and achieving the things that you want. And so many times people go, well, I have like a consistency problem. I can't do the things consistently that I need to do to get the result that I want. But he kind of took this person through this process that was so interesting that he's like, if you ever had a job that you didn't hate or that you didn't like, that you maybe even hated, but you showed up every single day for that job. Yeah. Right. And you kind of go through these few examples of how you're so consistent sometimes on the things that you don't love. And if you're consistent on things you don't love, well, why not learn to be consistent on the things that you do love? And that really at the end of the day, it's not a consistency problem, it's a commitment problem. And if you can be committed to being consistent on the things you do love, like your life will go so much further because you're already being consistent at so many things in your life. A lot of the time, they're just the things that you don't want to do. They're the things that you don't like. They're the things that you don't enjoy. So if you can flip that, like your life just goes on a different trajectory.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you can also fail at what you don't love. And I think sometimes people say, well, I got to be conservative or take the safe route, or this is what my parents want me to do, or whatever it is. but
Yeah.
you could fail at that just as much as you could fail at starting your own business or writing
Amen.
your book or any of it. And so, yeah, I think that sometimes like just even getting over the hurdles of not caring what other people are going to think about what you do, because honestly, like people don't really care that much.
Yeah.
People aren't rooting against you all the time. Like they're not just looking for ways to make fun of you. Maybe in high school, so maybe our brains tell us that that's going
Yeah.
to happen. But and then two, just understanding that like failure is inevitable. That like if you're not failing, you're probably not trying hard enough. Like failure is going to happen. It's going to come, and it's more about how we're moving forward and responding and trying to get to that failure so that we learn and that we grow and that we get to the next one. You know, that those are
Yeah.
things I feel like people kind of forget. They think that everything that everyone else thinks is going to be like what defines them. But when you're on your deathbed later in your life, you're not going to be like, wow, I really am glad I made those high school friends of mine happy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be
Yeah.
the case.
So true. So true. So let's say then we keep going down your journey. So you write this book, and at what point does speaking kind of come into your life? You know, did you grow up with someone? I know you said you were, if I heard this correctly, a little bit more innately introverted growing up. And I can relate in a way where I grew up more introverted and eventually started doing some speaking. And I'm curious for you, like, how did the book turn into, okay, now I'm speaking all over the world?
Yeah, it was a very interesting. I feel like throughout college, I wanted to learn from anyone and everyone I could. And so that meant that I was getting internships. I was constantly, even if they were free, I was getting jobs to do things for people. If people would come in and speak for our business school, I would try to talk to them afterwards and say, hey, do you
Yeah.
have anything for a college student? You know, like, what do you need? Because I'm available. And so I
Yeah.
was constantly that person who was just like, I just want to, soak it in so that at some point when it's time to take action, like I'm ready, like let's go.
Yeah.
And so I did. I had an internship at a leadership development company that at the very start, I was doing some email writing and things like that for them. And then they moved me up to cold calling, which usually that's not a step
Nice.
up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they started to realize, oh, this guy actually like can talk to people. Like he has a good personality. Maybe even there's a little bit of depth to him, you know?
Yeah.
And so they started to give me just very small opportunities to get up for 5 minutes, 10 minutes in front of some of the groups that they worked with and say, all right, Kyle, you have 5 minutes. It's on goal setting today. Like you have 10 minutes to prepare and then go. And that just like, it was a very throw me into the fire kind of situation. But when I started writing this book, they were the first people that I told. And when I finished it, I sent it to them and they said, hey, this needs a lot of edits. And I'm like, I know, I'm a senior in college. And they said, but we do think you have the bones here of a really solid book. We'd love to publish it for you. And we want you to come on full time as a speaker and as someone who works with us.
Nice.
And so that was my first full-time job after college, is having my book published, becoming a speaker for this leadership development company. And it kind of was the kickstart to what I am now doing.
Yeah. That's so cool. So one other thing I'm curious before last questions I have for you is, so you've done so much speaking, you've been traveling the world speaking to literally hundreds of thousands of people, which is amazing. One question I would have is, you're talking to people that are in such a developmental phase of their life, right? And I'd be curious, like, are there any common messages you share with them when it comes to, trying to figure out your life?
Yes. The fun part is it's some of the things that we've been talking about today, because I think so often at the middle school, the high school level, people go into these schools and they say, don't do this, don't do that, don't hang out with these people, don't spend time on this. And it's this constant like, don't. It's like every school is Hogwarts. Like Harry Potter is never listened to and every idea he has is bad. And it's just, I feel like a lot of these students are feeling just like so just trapped in the fact of like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, I can't misbehave. I can't do this. I can't do that. And So in my speaking, I constantly am going to schools and groups and conferences and just reminding young people that positive and intentional action is going to truly change your life. Like, you don't have to move everything out of your world to create a world that is purposeful, that's meaningful. And so instead of saying, don't do all these things, my message to students are, do things, try things, experience things, like try different foods, learn a different language, and establish what it is at the very core of who you are that you believe in. Do you believe in being kind? Do you believe in being generous? Do you believe in being someone that other people want to talk to? Like, what do you believe is going to be valuable in this one experience you have in this world? And then take action on it. Action packed. That's what I tell people, is live that action packed life, even if you're just starting with small things like choosing something to be grateful for every morning. Or, if kindness is important to you, write one Post-it note every day to someone else in your school and put it on their backpack or their locker, and just something kind to remind them of, like, how can you add just the tiniest bit of spark into your world based on the actions you do take versus the actions you're just avoiding.
Right. Amazing. So cool. And so one thing I'm curious as well is, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that now you're into some investment properties and you do, things in the real estate world now. I'm curious. I mean, again, we see, sort of this theme of NBA player to all of a sudden writing a book to speaking now, real estate, they're, different worlds, all of these things. And so I'm curious, kind of, how did that come into your world, and when did you go, okay, this is something else that I'm going to try and do? And, obviously it's in line with the theme you're saying of taking action, of trying things, of doing different things. But I'm curious, how did you kind of land on this one thing that's a little different?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that introverted nature of, I'm the person who is going to play musical comedy for people, like in the midst of a very serious talk about leadership, So I can be very extroverted at times and very out there. But then there's also that part of me that's just very interested in, the numbers around real estate, just the very black and white, like just figuring certain things out. And it was about 5 or 6 years ago where it was kind of like, man, I've read about 20 books on this. It's time to do it. It's time to take action, go for it. And it's fun because once you start to do some of that stuff, whether you succeed or fail or anywhere in between, like I said before, like, you're going to learn a lot. And fortunately for me, some of the things that I was doing early on, like, were successful and allowed me to continue growing and developing some of that side of my life. But I've always had a little bit of a problem with this idea that people will ask you all the time, well, what do you do? And I sometimes have a hard time answering that question because, I could say I'm a youth motivational speaker. I could say I'm an author. I could say I'm an entrepreneur. I could say I'm a husband. I could say I'm a father. I could say all these different things. And it's just such an open-ended. And what we end up saying is, I'm a realtor, or I'm in accounting, or I'm this. And we box ourselves into that all the time. And I just think that, like, at the end of the day, we're complex beings. We're humans. We have amazing brains that can really take on more than we think they can. And I think in my life, I've wanted to push the limits of that and say, all right, if I've been successful as an author, if I've been successful as a speaker, hopefully I'm successful as a husband and a father, then couldn't I be successful in real estate? Couldn't I be successful in other areas if they're of interest to me? And, maybe 5 years from now, you're going to interview me again, or I'm going to interview you, and we're going to have a fun reminiscing moment where maybe we're doing 30 other things that we don't even foresee right now. But when you're truly taking action, that's sometimes the way life goes.
Yeah. It's one of the things I heard the other day, because there's so many things that are attached to, I am. You go, I am this, I am that. It's like it becomes your identity. And, even if you say, for example, I am a NBA player and you fail at it, or I am XYZ and you fail at it, there's this internal letdown of, I'm not good enough, of I didn't make, kind of all these things that don't propel you to positive action in your life. And one of the things that was so interesting as we were diving into this topic of like I am, is having it be I am a learner. Because if I am a learner, it's whether you fail, whether you succeed, whether you try something new, you're always in this modality of, how can I grow? How can I become more? And if you're in that sort of a alignment, it doesn't matter what you're doing or trying, you're just always learning. And when you learn in life, I mean, that helps you get to the next level. It helps you become more, learn more about yourself. It leads to so many different things. And so I guess what I would be curious for you is when someone asks you what do you do, or for your I am statement, what would you identify that as?
Well, I'm going to have to reevaluate now that you just said that. I love that, by the way. That's amazing. I feel like we do that, don't we? We put ourselves in boxes, and do we like the boxes that we've put ourselves in?
Yeah.
As we open them up, is it Christmas morning and we're excited about it? Or are these boxes things that maybe we want to avoid? What's in the box? Like the old movie Seven. I do tell people I'm an author, speaker, and entrepreneur, but I also feel like, I'm an introvert and an extrovert. I'm a musical comedian. I'm someone who loves life and wants to be outside and hiking in the Colorado mountains. I love watching Milwaukee Bucks basketball games. There's a lot to it. I want to add something real quick, because I think it's important about what you were saying before. Life is hard. Life is hard. And I think that, like, to your point of like, I am a learner, that I think sometimes when we, especially for me, because I talk a lot about positive action, I have to remind myself, and I remind the people that I'm talking with, that like, just because we take positive action doesn't mean that the outcomes are going to be favorable. Like, we can take positive action and still fail. Like, there are things we can do in our lives that are totally intentional and purposeful, and they're in line with our vision, and we work as hard as we possibly can, and it just doesn't go our way. And so, I'm probably going to add I'm a learner to that answer, because I do feel that we need to not make sure that those failures aren't just continuing to keep us down and keeping us angry and frustrated and upset about everything moving forward, but that we can still take positive action, that we can move forward with hope, that we can decide that our life is going to be a positive one, even in spite of the outcomes that sometimes we're going to get. Yeah.
And I love too, when you said just the list of things that you go, I'm this, I am that, I'm the other. And I think, we do box ourselves in sometimes. And one challenge I would give to anybody that's listening to this is ask yourself, like, if you had to give yourself 5 I ams, like, what would those be? Would it be, I am an adventure seeker, I am someone who is a marketer, I am someone who is a writer, I am someone who's like, what would those 5 things be? And allow yourself to have some fun in it, so that, like you said, you don't see yourself as like in this box, but you see yourself as this like truly expressive, beautiful, unique human being, which is what you are. And so
absolutely. And
I love that.
And I know you don't know this, Stu, but quick shameless self-promotion. If you need any help with your I am statements, I created a spoken word album, 100% full of I am statements. Simply as, it's on Spotify. Look up Kyle Willkom. I have a spoken word album called Even When I'm Not. And it's an album just fully of self-talk, of things that I've needed to hear in my life, of things that other people, like, as they're defining who they want to be, who they are in this world, can kind of slowly start to remind themselves what positive self-talk looks like and feels like, and to steal some of those, to use them in their own lives, write them on your mirror in the morning so that you remember who you are, this strong, vibrant individual, as opposed to I am whatever job you do.
Right. Heck yeah, man. I love that. So everybody, make sure you go. You said it's on Spotify, right?
Yeah. It's on all the streaming services. So anywhere you listen to music.
Awesome. So one other thing I'm curious too, obviously you have an incredible amount of value that you brought us here in this little short amount of time. I'm curious if people want to dive deeper into your world, see what you're up to, follow everything you're doing. Where's the best place that we can point people to go?
Yeah, definitely follow me on social media if you'd like. You're probably going to get a lot of baby pictures at this point in my life.
Heck
I have a
yeah.
2-month-old daughter named Jovi. She is the cutest. So Kyle Willkom on all the platforms, Instagram, Twitter, things like that. You can find my books on Amazon. So Action Packed Leadership is my newest book. It was a #1 Amazon bestseller, which is pretty cool to be
Heck
able to
yeah.
say. Or check out some of those streaming things. I feel like they're good resources for people. I have some 1-minute pep talks for the morning times when you just don't feel like getting up. Like
Love that.
that was the first spoken word album I created. Just 1-minute pep talks, 60 seconds to just get you started in your day. So check me out on Spotify or Amazon Music and look me up there too.
Heck yeah. Awesome, awesome. And we'll put all that in the show notes too so people get easy access to it. And so, last question I have for you, Kyle, is a question we ask all of our guests because we want to help people find direction, but in perfect alignment with what you believe and do. We believe in doing it through action. So, I'm curious for you, what would you say is one thing that someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
I would say I would challenge you, whoever's listening to this and needs this challenge to do this today, but make the decision today to make one positive difference in the life of someone else. I know constantly when we're trying to find direction, we're thinking about, well, what's my passion? What's my purpose? Where should I go? What should I do? And I think sometimes that is just a black hole that will suck us into selfishness for the rest of our lives. Make the decision today to make one positive difference in the life of someone else. And man, if that leads you on the ripple effect journey, like that is going to be the most positive journey you're ever going to go on.
Heck yeah. I love that. That's different than I don't think I've ever got that answer. So I love that, man. So thank you again so much, Kyle, for hopping on here today again. Man, absolutely a load of value. And just thank you so much for your time, brother.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.